Chapter 22. I Light Out in the Storm. We all got in a big room in the tavern, and they lit up some candles. First, the doctor said, "I don't wish to be too hard on these two men, but I think they are frauds. These other two men may be in their gang. If they are frauds, we don't want them to get away with the property that Peter Wilkes left. If they are all right, they won't object to sending for that bag of gold and letting us hold it till they prove that they are all right." Everybody agreed, so I judged our gang was in a tight place. But the king only looked sorrowful and said, "Gentlemen, I wish the money was here, but alas, it ain't." "Where is it then?" "The slaves stole it, and I sold them before I had the money. My servant here," meaning me, "can tell you about it." The doctor and several others said, "Shucks." One man asked me if I saw them steal it. I said no, but I saw them sneaking out of the room where it was kept. The doctor whirled on me and said, "Are you English too?" I said yes. They all laughed and said, "Stuff." Then they had me up to tell what I knew about it. The king sent me a left-handed look out of the corner of his eye. I saw I had better talk on the right side. I began to tell about England and all the English Wilkesies. I didn't get far before Levi Bell said, "You can stop, my boy. I wouldn't strain myself. I reckon you are not used to lying, you do it so poor." The king reached out his hand to the lawyer and said, "Is this my poor dead brother's old friend, Levi Bell? He wrote so often about you." The lawyer shook his hand and looked pleased. They talked right along a while. Then the lawyer took the king to one side and talked low. At last, the lawyer spoke up and said, "That will fix it. I'll take the order and send it along with your brother's order." They got paper and pen, and the king twisted his head to one side and scrawled off something. Then the lawyer handed the pen to the duke, and for the first time the duke looked sick. But he took the pen and wrote. Then the lawyer turned to the new old gentleman and said, "You and your brother please write a line or two and sign your names." The old gentleman wrote, but nobody could read it. Then the lawyer snaked some old letters out of his pocket and looked at them, and looked at the writing done by the king and the duke. He said, "These old letters are from Harvey Wilkes. Anybody can see that the handwriting of these two men is not that of Harvey Wilkes." The king and the duke looked sold and foolish to see how the lawyer had tricked them. Lawyer Bell went on speaking. "But what beats me is that this old gentleman's handwriting is not Harvey Wilkes either. Fact is, the scratching he does is hardly writing. I can't read a word of it." The new old gentleman said, "Let me explain. My handwriting is so poor nobody can read it but my brother there. So he copies for me. It is his handwriting you have there in the old letters, not mine." "Well," said the lawyer, "this is a state of things. If you will get him to write a line or two, we can compare." "He can't write with his left hand," said the old gentleman. "Well, well, well," said the lawyer. "I thought I had the problem solved, but my plan has gone to grass. Anyway, one thing is proved. This is not Harvey Wilkes," and he nodded toward the king. Well, that mule-headed old fool wouldn't give in then. He said it was no fair test. He warmed up and went warbling along till he was beginning to believe himself. Pretty soon the new gentleman broke in. "I have thought of something. Is there anybody here that helped to lay out my brother Peter Wilkes for burying?" "Yes," said somebody. "Me and Ab Turner did. We are both here." The old gentleman turned to the king and said, "Maybe you can tell me what was tattooed on his breast?" He whitened a little. I said to myself, "Now he will throw up the sponge." Well, he didn't. I never saw anything like that old blister for clean and out cheek. I reckon he thought he would keep the thing up till he tired the people and he could break loose and get away. "Yes, sir," he said. "I can tell you what was tattooed on his breast. A blue arrow. Small. If you didn't look close, you couldn't see it." Both of the men spoke up. "We didn't see such a mark." "Good," said the old gentleman. "Now I will tell you what you did see on his breast. 3 small letters, PBW. Come now, isn't that what you saw?" "No, we didn't. We didn't see any marks at all." Everybody began whooping at once and singing out, "The whole gang is a fraud. Duck 'em, drown 'em, ride 'em on a rail." But the lawyer said, "There is one way yet. Let's go dig up the corpse and look." "Hooray!" they all shouted. "And if we don't find the marks, lynch the whole gang." I was scared now, but there was no getting away. They gripped us all and marched us along to the graveyard. Heinz hung on to my wrist so tight it hurt. We swarmed along the road like wild cats. It was night now, about 9 o'clock. To make it more scary, the sky was clouding up, the lightning beginning to wink and flitter, and the wind to shiver in the leaves. The crowd swarmed into the graveyard and washed over it like an overflow. When they got to the grave, they found they had about 100 times as many shovels as they needed, but nobody had thought to bring a lantern. They sent a man to the nearest house, half a mile off, to borrow one, and sailed in to digging by the lightning flickers. The rain started, and the wind swished along, and the lightning got brisker, and the thunder boomed. At last they got out the coffin and began to unscrew the lid. Then such crowding and shouldering and shoving to get a sight you never did see. In the dark that way, it was awful. All of a sudden in the lightning let go a perfect sluice of white glare, and somebody sung out, "By the living Jingo, here's the bag of gold on his breast." Hines let out a whoop like everyone else, dropping my wrist, and surged up to bust his way in for a look. The way I lit out and shinned for a road in the dark, nobody can tell. I had the road all to myself, and I fairly flew through the solid dark and the now and then glares of lightning. The rain was buzzing, and the lightning was thrashing, and the thunder was splitting. Sure as you are born, I did clip it along. When I struck the town, nobody was out in the storm, so I humped it along straight through the main street. When I got near our house, I aimed my eye and set it. No light there, the house all dark, which made me feel sorry and kind of hurt. I didn't know why. But at last, just as I was sailing by, flash comes the light in Mary Jane's window, and my heart swelled up sudden like a bust. The same second the house was, and all was behind me in the dark, and wasn't ever going to be before me again in this world. She was the best girl I ever did see, and had the most sand. I got down to the river and looked sharp for a boat to borrow. The first one of the lightning showed me, I snatched and shoved off. The towhead was out there in the middle of the river, but I didn't lose any time. When I got to the raft, I was so fagged I would have stretched out to blow and gasp if I could have afforded it. But just the minute I sprung aboard, I yelled out, "Come on, Jim, set her loose. Glory to be goodness, we're shut off them. Cut loose and let her slide." In 2 seconds we went sliding down the river. It did seem to be good and free again, all by ourselves on the big river. I had to skip around and jump up and crack my heels a few times. But about the third crack I heard a sound. I held my breath and listened. Sure enough, when the next flash of lightning busted out over the water, here they come, and just laying to their oars and making their skiff hum. It was the king and the duke. I wilted right down. It was all I could do to keep from crying. When they got aboard, the king went for me and shook me by the collar. "Trying to give us the slip, you pup? Tired of our company, hey? Tell me, what was your idea of running away, or I will shake the insides out of you." It didn't seem any good for me to stay. I couldn't do anything, and I didn't want to be hung, if I could get away. "Oh, yes, a likely story." And he shook me up again and said he reckoned he would drown me. But then the Duke said, "Let go that boy, you old idiot. Did you do any different? Did you inquire around for him when you got loose? I don't remember it." So the king let go of me and commenced to cuss that town and everybody in it. But the Duke said, "You better give yourself a good cussing. You haven't done a thing from the start that had any sense in it, except to come out so cheeky for that blue arrow mark. That trick took 'em to the graveyard. If the fools hadn't found the gold and got so excited they let go all holds, we would have been strung up. How did that bag of gold get in there?" They kept still a minute thinking. Then the king said, kind of absent-minded, "And I thought the servants strolled it." "Yes," said the Duke, kind of slow and sarcastic. "You did think that." The king ruffled up and said, "Look here, Bilgewater, what are you referring to?" "When it comes to that, maybe you'll let me ask what are you referring to?" "Shucks," said the king, very sarcastic. "Maybe you walked in your sleep and didn't know when you put it there." The Duke bristled up and said, "Oh, let up on this cussed nonsense. Do you think you can fool me? I know who hid the money in the coffin." "Yes, sir, you do know because you put it in there yourself." "It's a lie." Then the Duke went for him till the king sung out, "Take your hands off. Let go my throat. I take it all back. Let go. Not till you own up that you hid the money in the coffin, intending to give me the slip and go back and dig it up for yourself." The king began to gurgle, and then he gasped out, "'Nough, I own up." The Duke took his hands off and said, "If you ever deny it again, I'll drown you." I never saw such an old ostrich for wanting to gobble everything. And now what have you got for it? They have all their money back, and all ours too. Get out of my sight." The king sneaked into the wigwam and took to his bottle. Before long the duke tackled his bottle. In half an hour they got thick as thieves again, and went off snoring in each other's arms.